like. And make sure to engage in comments and share this video to your friends and story lovers. And click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to Inquisco for more real and true stories like this. It started with frustration, an itch under my skin, an unshakable restlessness that no amount of deep breaths or forced smiles could soothe. My husband, Jeffrey, had cheated, not just once, not just a mistake, a full-blown affair with some woman from his office. And I, like an idiot, stayed. Not for him, never for him, but for our children, for the life I had spent years building. That's what everyone told me I should do. The women at the PTA meetings, my mother, even my best friend. They all acted like leaving would be more destructive than what he had already done. Like I should be grateful he chose to stay. Like I should feel relief that the affair had ended, as if knowing it had happened at all wasn't enough to unravel everything inside me. I tried to forgive him. At least, I tried to play the part. We went to therapy. He cried, he begged, he swore it was a mistake. And maybe it was, but I wasn't blind. It hadn't just been a lapse in judgment. He'd built something with her, a secret world I hadn't been a part of. Hotel rooms, late-night messages, stolen moments at work. He gave her his time, his affection, the parts of himself I hadn't seen in years. And yet, I was expected to patch it all up, to put on a smile, to pretend like I didn't lie awake at night wondering if he was still thinking about her. The worst part? It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the way I had let myself shrink in our marriage. The way I had put everything into our family, into being a good wife, a good mother, and let myself disappear in the process. Somewhere along the way, I had become dull, predictable, convenient. I hated him for what he did, but I hated myself more for letting it happen. That's when I started going to the gym. Not for revenge, not at first. It wasn't some calculated plan to make Jeffrey jealous, to transform into the kind of woman who would make him regret what he'd done. No, I just needed something that was mine, something to make me feel awake again. It started small. A few treadmill runs, some light weightlifting. I wasn't trying to become someone else, just trying to find me again. And for a while it was just a routine, an hour to myself. A place where I wasn't a wife or a mother, where no one needed me. Then I met Aiden. It was on a morning when I had been particularly exhausted, my body aching from pushing too hard the day before. I was staring at the weights, trying to psych myself up, when I heard a voice behind me. "Need a spot?" I turned and saw him, tall, lean but strong. The kind of body that came from years of discipline. His eyes were sharp, but there was a softness to them, a patience. He wasn't one of those trainers who barked orders and made you feel incompetent. There was something easy about the way he carried himself, like he knew exactly how to make someone feel comfortable in their own skin. "I think I'm just trying to decide if I have the energy for this today," I admitted with a small laugh. He smiled. "That's half the battle." Then after a pause, he added, "I'm Aiden, by the way." I told him my name, expecting the conversation to end there, but it didn't. He asked about my fitness goals, what I was hoping to get out of this, if I was training for anything specific. I should have given the usual answer, something about wanting to be healthier, to get stronger, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "I just want to feel like myself again." He tilted his head slightly, studying me in that way that made me feel exposed, like he could see right through me. But instead of pushing, he nodded. "That's a good reason to be here." That was the beginning. At first, it was just casual. He gave me tips, helped adjust my form, encouraged me to push a little harder. I liked his presence, the way he made me feel like I belonged there. But as the weeks went on, something shifted. It wasn't just about the workouts anymore. It was about him. Aiden started to feel safe. He wasn't like Jeffrey. He listened. He paid attention. When I spoke, he wasn't just waiting for his turn to talk. He actually heard me. And I was starving for that kind of attention, the kind that made me feel seen. Then there were the moments, the small, almost imperceptible ones, that started to build between us. The way he'd linger just a little too long when spotting me. The way he'd place his hand on my back to guide me to a machine. His touch, light but deliberate. The way his eyes would flicker over me when he thought I wasn't looking. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was reading into things because I wanted to feel desirable again. But deep down, I knew. And one evening, after a particularly grueling session, it became undeniable. I had been pushing myself hard, sweat dripping down my back, my muscles trembling from exertion. When I finished, I sat down on a bench, catching my breath. Aiden crouched in front of me, a teasing smirk on his lips. "You're gonna feel that tomorrow," he said. I let out a tired laugh. I already feel it now. His eyes met mine, something unspoken passing between us. Neither of us moved. But I felt it, the pull, the static in the air. I should have looked away, should have said something to break the tension, but I didn't, and neither did he. I left the gym that night with my pulse still racing, but it had nothing to do with the workout. I replayed the moment over and over in my head on the drive home. The way Aiden had crouched in front of me, his face close enough that I could see the slight sheen of sweat on his forehead, the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. The way neither of us had moved, as if we were waiting, both of us, to see who would break first. It had been nothing, and yet it had been everything. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. Jeffrey was in the living room, his feet propped up on the coffee table, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look up. For a second, I just stood there, watching him, wondering if he had ever felt this way about me, if there had ever been a moment in the last few years where his heart had pounded just from being close to me. I already knew the answer. I took a slow breath, pushed the thoughts away, and walked past him toward the kitchen. "Dinner's in the fridge," he said flatly, still staring at his screen. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it was, how easy it had become for him to act like we were just roommates, passing through the same space. He had no idea what was going on inside me, no idea that I had just been inches away from another man, fighting the urge to close the distance. No idea how much I wanted to. The next time I saw Aiden, the air between us had changed. It was subtle at first, the way his hand lingered a little longer when he adjusted my form, the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, the way our conversation stretched, dipping into things that had nothing to do with fitness. Then one night, the shift became impossible to ignore. I had stayed late, pushing through an extra set long after most people had left. Aiden had been with another client earlier, but now it was just us. The gym felt quieter, the fluorescent lights casting a soft glow over the empty space. I had been doing squats, and by the time I was on my last rep, my legs were shaking. As I struggled to push through the final movement, Aiden stepped behind me, close, too close. "Come on," he murmured, his voice low, his hands hovering just near my waist, but not quite touching. "You've got this." I gritted my teeth, pushed through the burn, and finally straightened. But as soon as I did, my balance wavered, and Aiden's hands shot out, steadying me, His grip was firm, his fingers pressing into my sides just above my hips. I should have stepped away, should have thanked him and created some distance, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed there, my back barely an inch from his chest, his hands still holding me in place. I could feel the heat of his skin through my shirt, the rise and fall of his breath. For a second, just a second, I closed my eyes. It would be so easy. All I had to do was lean back, just slightly, and I would feel him against me. I would know what it was like to be wanted again. And then just as quickly, I pulled away. Aiden's hands dropped, but he didn't move. I turned to face him, my pulse hammering in my ears. Neither of us spoke. I searched his face, looking for some sign that I had imagined all of this, that I was just projecting my own desires onto him. But it was there, clear as day. The way his gaze flickered to my lips, the way his jaw tightened like he was fighting something just as hard as I was, the way he wanted me too. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. I should go. Aiden nodded, but he didn't look away. Yeah, he said, probably. But neither of us moved. The pull between us was like gravity, invisible but undeniable. And for a moment, I thought, this is it. This is where the line breaks, where we cross into something neither of us can take back. And then my phone buzzed. I startled, stepping back as if I had been caught. My hands fumbled for my bag as I yanked it open, fishing out my phone. Jeffrey's name flashed across the screen. Just like that, the moment shattered. I let out a breath, shook my head, and turned away. "Good night, Aiden," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't look back as I walked out the door, but I could still feel him watching me. I barely slept that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in my body still buzzing from what had almost happened. What could have happened? Every time I closed my eyes, I felt Aiden's hands on me again, steadying me, lingering, igniting something I hadn't felt in years. My body still reacted to the memory, a rush of heat curling deep inside me at the thought of his breath against my skin, the unspoken tension crackling between us. But then there was Jeffrey's name flashing across my phone, that cold, harsh reminder of my reality. I turned onto my side, gripping the sheets. I had wanted to feel desired, wanted to be seen. But this was getting dangerous. I had to stop. I lasted 3 days. 3 days of trying to convince myself that I was imagining everything, that I had misread Aiden, that I was just projecting my own loneliness onto him. Then, on the 4th day, it all came crashing down. It started the moment I walked into the gym. Aiden was already there, stretching near the weight rack. He looked up when he saw me, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something dark, something knowing. I had barely set my bag down when he spoke. "Come with me." It wasn't a question. I hesitated, glancing around, but the gym was busy, filled with people too focused on their own workouts to notice us. Still, I shouldn't have followed him. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. He led me to the back of the gym, past the cardio machines, past the rows of weights, into a small, dimly lit storage room. As soon as the door shut behind us, the air shifted. It was just the two of us. No distractions, no excuses. I swallowed hard, pressing my back against the door. Aiden. His name barely made it past my lips before he closed the distance, one hand bracing against the wall beside my head, the other hovering just near my waist. He wasn't touching me, not yet, but he could. I could feel the heat of him, the pull of something we had both been trying so hard to resist. He leaned in, his voice low. "Tell me to stop." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He let out a slow breath, his gaze flickering between my eyes and my lips. You can't, can you? I shuddered. I should have. I should have shoved him away, should have walked out and never looked back. But I didn't move, because I didn't want to. The air between us was thick, electric, the weight of unspoken desire pressing down on both of us. His fingers brushed against my hip, the lightest touch, barely there, but it sent a shiver down my spine. I could feel my resolve slipping. Then, my phone rang. Again. The sound was jarring in the suffocating silence, slicing through the moment like a knife. I let out a shaky breath, fumbling for my bag. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone, expecting to see Jeffrey's name again. But it wasn't him. It was an unknown number. My stomach twisted. Aiden took a step back, running a hand through his hair. The moment was gone, but the tension still crackled in the air. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Silence. And then, Mrs. Wells? The voice was unfamiliar. A woman. Professional. Yes. A pause. This is Officer Bradley from the Eastwood Police Department. I'm calling regarding your husband, Jeffrey Wells. My blood ran cold. I felt Aiden stiffen beside me, his eyes narrowing. What about him? I whispered. The officer took a breath. I'm afraid there's been an accident. The drive to the hospital was a blur. I barely registered Aiden helping me into the car, barely heard him telling me to breathe, that everything would be okay. But how could it be? My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip my phone. My mind raced, with every possible scenario. An accident? What kind? How bad was it? Was he... I swallowed back the thought, my pulse pounding in my ears. When we arrived, I barely noticed Aiden parking the car. I was already moving, my feet carrying me forward before I even realized I was out of the car. The hospital was bright, sterile, the scent of antiseptic burning my nose. Excuse me, I'm looking for Jeffrey Wells, I said breathlessly at the front desk. I got a call. The nurse gave me a sympathetic look. He's in the ICU. Follow me. My legs felt numb as I walked behind her. Aiden was still with me. He hadn't said a word, but his presence was solid, grounding. Finally, we reached the room. The sight of Jeffrey stopped me cold. He was lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines, his face bruised and swollen. But he was alive. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The doctor stepped forward. He suffered a severe concussion and a few broken ribs, but he's stable for now, he said. He was very lucky. I nodded numbly, my eyes still locked on Jeffrey. Then, as if sensing me, he stirred. His eyes fluttered open, hazy and unfocused. I stepped closer. Jeffrey? His gaze slowly found mine. And then he started laughing, a weak, raspy chuckle that sent a chill down my spine. I froze. Jeffrey? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. His eyes sharpened, and when he spoke, his next words sent ice through my veins. You think I didn't know? My breath caught. He knew about Aiden, knew about everything. And then, still grinning, he whispered, This isn't over. My stomach twisted, my mind reeling. I felt Aiden step closer behind me, his presence warm, steady, but my entire body had gone cold. Jeffrey's eyes burned into mine. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even hurt. He was playing me. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't been the one in control, not even close. Click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to Inquisco for more real and true stories like this.